Well, I told the secretary that there's a big bunch of hypocrisy and political correctness around these issues. Because if you look at China, look at the EU-China trade relationship. We represent 1.2% of that. 1.2% of the EU-China relationship. So does anyone think seriously that we are the game changers there? I don't think so. When it comes to Russia, you know, it's not the Central European energy companies to take part in the biggest investment of energy history of Europe, namely Nord Stream 2. It was not the Hungarian Prime Minister, but the French President, Monsieur Macron, to be invited as a star guest to last year's St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. It was the 4 CEOs of the 4 biggest Western European energy companies to sit around President Putin during the last Russian Energy Week's presidential panel. So what is going on in Europe in this regard is an enormous hypocrisy, because Western European countries criticize Russia above the surface, but under the surface they make enormous businesses with Russia for billions of euros, with which we definitely don't have a problem. But if this is the case, then don't apply double standards.
The latest figures from the European Commission forecast reasonably robust growth for Hungary this year, 3.4%, but it does predict a bit of a downturn the following year. Over the weekend, Prime Minister Viktor Orban announced a measure to address a potential economic challenge, that's Hungary's declining birth rate, by saying that anyone raising 4 or more children won't have to pay income tax for life. That's an extraordinary measure. I think it got everyone's attention around the world. Tell us more about that challenge and how you're addressing it.
We have investment records broken, export records broken. Now export over GDP ratio is higher than 80%. But we consider demography as extremely important as well. Unfortunately, like other European countries, we have a decrease in population. Since we have been in office, the trend of decrease has been slowed down really significantly. We want to turn it back, basically, to an increase again. But we think that we don't need migration to tackle this challenge, but we need more support to our families. So we want to avoid the situation that the question whether you raise more kids to be a purely economic decision. That's something that this is something that we would like to avoid. That's why we have announced a 7-point plan to support the families. Out of the 7 points, definitely one is the lifetime exemption of paying personal income tax in case of raising 4 kids.
We know your government came to power largely because of its anti-immigrant stance, as you pointed out. I'm wondering, would you consider perhaps a skilled migration program? One exists in countries like the US, Australia, the UK. Perhaps increasing skilled migration could address that declining birth rate.
Look, our policy is different than that. Currently, there are 4.5 million people working in Hungary. Our population is a little bit lower than 10 million. So 4.5 million people at work. Maximum, there's 5 million people in the country on the work of whose we can count on. So it would be very irrational from our perspective to run an economic policy which would end up in a situation where we would need the work of 6 million people, because we don't have that much. So we run a policy which ends up in a situation where we have where we can count on the work of these 4.5 to 5 million people. And instead of importing skills, we want to give skills to these people.
You're obviously the foreign minister. You are the face of Hungary, essentially, when you're abroad in the absence of the prime minister. I'm wondering, how does it make you feel when the prime minister last week, he made a comment to Germany's Bild newspaper describing refugees as Muslim invaders? It must make your job a lot harder, particularly when you are going to countries like Turkey that are predominantly Muslim.
I would like to give you the context. We have been a Christian country for the last more than 1,000 years. We take it seriously. We take our Christian heritage seriously. We take our faith seriously. So being a Christian definitely does not mean, must not mean, and cannot mean being like anti-Muslim. And in 2015, we have been faced with a massive illegal influx of migration. 400,000 aggressive people entered the territory of our country, behaved in a totally unacceptable way, threatening our people, totally disrespecting the way of life, our rules, regulations, heritage, whatever. So we made it very clear that we don't want this to be repeated. Definitely, on the migration issue, we have a different, let's say, approach with Turkey. But Turkey is our strategic ally and friend, and we recognize that there's a different approach there, but it doesn't hinder us from building friendships.
Do you acknowledge, though, that when a quote like that, calling refugees Muslim invaders, how that might be misconstrued as being perhaps Islamophobic or anti-Islam?
We have no phobia, especially we don't have no Islamophobia. We always respect the religion of other people. But in the meantime, we expect others to respect our religion and faith and heritage as well. So if there's a mutual respect, I think then the world's got to be a much better place.
Minister Peter Szijjarto, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you very much again for your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.